Jordan opened its airspace to Israeli and American British fighter jets and even sent out its own jets to protect Israel from the Iranian missile and drone attacks. So why would Jordan place its support and backing for Israel while at the same time Israel are undertaking a plausible genocide and ethnic cleansing against the people of Gaza? You know, attempting to wipe out a population in Gaza either by killing them or creating such terrible conditions like famine or immense destruction to homes, mosques and hospitals that life becomes unbearable or impossible for the Palestinians to live in Gaza. So Jordan, rather than coming to the aid of the Palestinians or even remaining neutral, and to be honest, that in itself, remaining neutral when we're seeing a genocide, is itself a betrayal. But they in fact decided to use its military and airspace to support and defend Israel.
Yet the message the Arab world is hearing is loud and clear. Palestinians' lives matter less than Israeli ones.
Anyone who's been following Jordanian history and that of the rulers of Jordan will not be surprised. The political leadership of Jordan have a history of betrayal and treachery towards the Muslims and have sided with colonialists and imperialists throughout their short history. If we understand this, we can now understand why the current Jordanian regime backs Israel and the West. So King Abdullah II is simply the current ruler in a line of rulers that have firmly supported the Western neo-colonial and colonial agenda in the region. It started with Sharif Hussein, the ruler of Hijaz, in the latter part of the 19th and early 20th century, a ruler who was under the authority of the Uthmani Khilafah at that time, and he and his sons conspired with the British to fight and rebel against the Ottomans, do khuruj against the Ottomans, with the promise that the British would install him and his sons as rulers over the region.
In July 1915, Sharif Hussein smuggled a message to the British High Commissioner in Cairo, Sir Henry McMahon, offering to raise a substantial Arab force against the Ottomans in return for British support for Arab independence. In the ensuing secret correspondence between the two men, Sharif Hussein was given to understand that he could expect British support in achieving some of his ambitions in the event of an Ottoman defeat.
He actually believed that Britain would actually allow him to become the leader of an independent Arab state if he helped expel the Ottomans from the region. Remember also, at this time, the Ottomans or the Uthmani Khilafah saw themselves as the true leaders of the Muslim world. Yet through nationalistic agitation, the desire for power, and both military and financial support from the British, Sharif Hussein and his sons revolted against the Ottoman Caliphate in what's known as the Arab Revolt of 1916. At this time as well, Britain and France had agreed a secret arrangement known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement that divided up the Arab lands into British and French spheres of control, thus laying down the nationalistic boundaries we see today, and therefore dividing Muslim lands and dividing their strengths into these small little Western-backed statelets. So while the British used Sharif Hussein with a promise of an independent Arab state, they in fact wanted to carve up the Arab world, and so with the help of the Arab Revolt, the British and the French were able to defeat and expel the Ottomans from the region, from the Arab lands. And after World War I, the League of Nations agreed that Palestine, Transjordan and Iraq would be under British colonial rule or mandate, and that Syria, Lebanon as well as some North African countries would be under French mandate rule. Sharif Hussein was placated by this by having his sons installed as rulers over newly formed Arab states. King Abdullah, the son of Sharif Hussein, was gifted Transjordan in 1921, and King Faisal was initially installed as a ruler over Syria, but after the French forced him out, the British then installed him as the ruler over Iraq, which the British at the time had newly discovered oil. Even though Transjordan was a newly established state, the British still maintained control over the state. Transjordan only formally received independence in 1946, but even then, many of its armed forces, Jordanian armed forces, were still led by British military officers. In fact, the British officer John Glubb, who led and trained the Arab Legion of Transjordan and Jordan from 1939 to 1956, was the de facto man in charge. Thus, the king was subservient to British interests. Is it a wonder then that if Arab legions were being led by British army officers, that they would face a devastating defeat by the Zionists in 1948? It was clearly never meant to be a real war for Palestine, but a fake war to allow the establishment of the Israeli state. The Israeli historian Evi Shalem wrote about the secret collusion that King Abdullah had with Zionists even before the establishment of the Israeli state. King Abdullah also agreed to the formation of Israel and splitting up of Palestine, which was drafted in the Peel Commission in 1937.
They recommend that Palestine be partitioned, a sovereign Jewish state to occupy this territory, here an Arab state to include Transjordania, and this strip, including the holy cities, to remain under British mandate.
The point is, Sharif Hussein and his sons sided with the British, fought against the Ottoman Caliphate on behalf of the British, were then installed as leaders over the newly formed Arab states, colluded secretly with the Zionists even before the formation of Israel, all the while being under the supervision and control of the British. King Abdullah I was assassinated in Jerusalem in 1951, and his son King Talal became ruler. King Talal was supposedly anti-British, and within a year he was removed. His wife Queen Zayn, who had relations with the British, asked the British to section him as she claimed he had gone mad. He was then taken to a French sanitarium by the British and later died in a Turkish sanitarium in 1972. His son, however, assumed authority, that is King Hussein, the current leader's father, and who fully normalized Jordan's relations with Israel.
First of all, I don't believe that it is only peace between the leadership of Israel and the leadership of Jordan. The people approved the choice with an overwhelming majority, and therefore provided the foundation for a real, warm, genuine peace based on mutual respect, a desire to cooperate and work and build and make up for all the many, many years that were lost.
This normalization resulted in Israel exercising control over Jordanian economy, with Israel now in control over water and gas supplies to Jordan. This should be a very clear warning that Israel, as a colonial project, attempts to use normalization with surrounding Arab countries as a way to remove their threat, but also as a way to control and exert its Israel influence and the Western influence over these Arab states. And perhaps something that many people aren't aware of, but America, also attempting to exert control over Jordan and its leaders, have been providing military and economic aid to the country since the 1950s. When the current ruler, King Abdullah II, came to power after the death of his father, King Hussein, then America has substantially increased its military aid, such that Jordan is now the third largest recipient of American aid. King Abdullah II himself is the son of a British mother, Antoinette Gardiner, and he was trained at the British Military College Sandhurst. After his training at Sandhurst Military College, Abdullah was commissioned as a second lieutenant to serve in the British Army. Yes, the British Army. And he spent a year in Britain and West Germany as a troop commander for the British Army in the 13th and 18th Royal Hussars. He barely spoke Arabic and had to learn it when he ascended the Jordanian throne. He now speaks it with a clear British accent. Jordan itself allows American bases hosting up to 3,000 American troops, including fighter jets, as we saw being used in defense of Israel. It's pretty clear then that the Hashemite leaders of Jordan were born out of rebellion against the Ottoman Caliphate, engaged in secret diplomacy with the Zionists, were one of the first countries to normalize with Israel, allied themselves with the British against the Uthmani Khilafah, allow Israel to have strategic control over its economy, and also host American troops that helps defend Israel in its own lands. So for all the claims that Jordan supports Palestine, it's clear where their loyalties lie. You know, even though Jordan holds the title of custodian of Al-Aqsa, they have never once sought to protect whenever we've seen IDF troops storm the mosque. Therefore, it's clear where their loyalties lie. This isn't unknown to many Palestinians living in Jordan or even Jordanians themselves. But through repression and political dissent, and particularly repression against Islamic political movements that call for real change, it's been difficult to unsee the pro-Western, pro-Israeli Jordanian leaders from power. But even then, and despite the numerous arrests, we have now seen tens of thousands of Muslims in Jordan marching against the Israeli embassy, calling for it to be shut down and calling for the reversal of normalization with Israel. Sadly, while the current leadership doesn't seem to be willing to act in defense of Palestine or even just reversing normalization with Israel, the Muslims and Arabs in the streets of Amman and across the Muslim world clearly want to see change and an effective leadership that won't just simply kowtow to Israel and simply act like puppets of the West. This is why the tame and theatrical response by Iran is hailed by some Muslims. But let's not be deceived by this theatrical response by Iran and the games regional actors play, because what is required is not just a reversal of normalization with Israel, but a reversal of the treacherous Sykes-Picot Agreement, the removal of artificial borders imposed by the West to serve theirs and Israel's interest in the region, real unity under an Islamic sincere leadership. You see, the Muslim world, with its massive population, energy resources like oil and gas and other natural resources, and with a potential sizable military at its disposal, isn't lacking in power. It's lacking in sincere Islamic leadership, something that we need to strive for, inshallah.